Welcome, Margo. It's so great to have you join us here today. Margo is the founder of Heartfelt CFO and Tax Services, and she's gracefully given us some time to talk to us about a few really hot topics in the industry. So we're really looking forward to get into that. But I think the first things first is, Margo, please tell us a little about yourself and your company.
So I founded Heartfelt CFO and Tax Services about 5 years ago, which is a reformation of what used to be called Margo's Bookkeeping. So when I began, we were doing bookkeeping, and I started it as a stay-at-home mom. And from the goal of really helping business owners align on the tax jargon and accounting jargon of day-to-day business needs and year-end needs. And over time, what ended up happening is that I felt that the voice of accounting needed to shift, which is where Heartfelt CFO became, where CFO really understanding the real edge and the architecture of what could happen in accounting and tax. What I saw was business owners really just getting lost in it and overpaying on taxes, not getting salaries. So our cutting edge is really seeing through the noise and helping you make more money, keep the money in your pocket that you're making, pay less taxes, build the business of your dreams. While doing that, I'm a mom of two. I live in New Jersey, and for fun, I go swimming, I run, I love nature, more of like a brisk walk these days. I journal, meditate, I love Pilates and yoga, light weights these days, not like the heavy boxing anymore, so many things. Self-involvement has been development education has been a real fave of mine, along with being with my kids and really evolving the business. And what I would say is it's been such a journey building Heartfelt CFO and Tax, and I'm really excited to talk about it today. I'm grateful to be able to share with you today in so many ways.
Oh, Margo, that's super inspirational. I think just personally being, a mom raising a family plus building a successful business. I mean, that is incredibly difficult to do. And so just hats off for that. Brilliant. So I'm actually just going to run us through, just for our listeners, just to hear about the basic topics that we're going to be, and then we'll get straight into it. So one of the first things is the quality over quantity debate. So this is going to be a fun one. And then the danger of the shortcut culture, as we call it. And then the third one is going to be architecting life versus defaulting to tech, which is also something that a lot of our listeners are interested in. And then the future of the human element, we'll lock it off there. So really getting into the quality over quantity debate. So in our previous discussion, you've been vocal about prioritizing custom-based solutions over the generic one-size-fits-all approach that dominates the industry today. So as AI makes it easier than ever to produce quantity, how do you believe a firm's commitment to pure human-led quality becomes the ultimate competitive advantage?
I think what happens is in businesses, they don't see the quality until they're in a catastrophe or in some type of place where they can't pay a bill, the taxes are too high. They're really stumbled against the wall. And I'll tell you an example. So we're working with a client now, and when we started with them, their payroll system was just really non-existent. The owner, which is fairly common, steps in, tries to do it, thinks they're saving money. But what happens is that time after time after time, the stumbling blocks become stronger and stronger, and then the noise becomes stronger between employees disgruntled and those different types of things. So we think standardized systems can work. However, every business is unique in different ways, which is really what brings you your unique vision in terms of the business of income and those types of things. So when it comes to quality over anything else and the power of AI, just trying to put an outside system to what may not be an exact fit is basically you're liability. It's basically your debt. It's basically your area to look into because you just took on what worked for somebody else and it's a template. It actually reminds me of, I think it was maybe like 10 years ago in the accounting industry, where it was like where apps started to become way more popular on how we would get the information from clients, like around reconciliations, around all of these document fetching apps and things. And everyone took time to adapt. And then they were like, oh, yes, now we can, just dominate on those and everything is going to be okay. But what ended up happening was, how do you use those apps? How do you implement those things? So your unique value and your unique culture, there's no way to adapt to something that's a one size fits all. So whether you're just starting 50,000, 100,000, 250 million, like all over the map, you can pretend and think that your business is simple because you may not be ready to advance. But the more important thing is it's not where you are in the moment making these decisions, it's looking ahead. Because chances are what's hitting you is just a brinks. And I'm actually going to tell you another story. I think it's about 5 years ago now. I had a client who stole from me. And it's a very interesting story. And it literally hit every area of my life. Because what ended up happening was the money came out double. And all of these sorts of attacks were coming in and like all of these things from different levels. And it took almost 2 years to really settle through legal costs and all of these things. And what it forced me to do was really take all of the situations that I was like, I thought was standard in the industry. I didn't really customize for how my business was being built. And I had to upgrade and update our operating agreement, our contract agreement, which is, how people will operate once they're in. So you don't know how it hits you. And then all the momentum of what you're building over time can just be depleted. And at a moment's notice, it either can shift or it can downgrade. And what I see far common is that people escalate, and they're like, oh, making a lot of money because they want the money. But their operating system is still operating at 300,000 and they're at like 1 million, 2 million and above and beyond and all of those things. And I see it time and time again. But until the infrastructure matches where you're going, so whether it's AI and just getting into AI a bit, I have to say there are advantages to it, and I'm not going to say there's not. But what I'm going to say is that it's not a copy and paste. It's not a way to avoid the human part to it. And the human part to what's actually going on is actually the clues and keys to your success, to your next steps. In my company, we have specific tools on how we use it, and it's adapt to how I use the tax law code, how I talk and curate to clients, my infrastructure. It's not just using from Google and copying and pasting, or from the AI tools and Claude. And I don't know, like it really went far beyond me. But what I can tell you is that when we have done this for clients, the money makes itself, because the part of just that one shift, it becomes easier than you think. And that one shift becomes the difference between like $50,000 profit or even like $500,000. So it's all how you want to be involved. And there's no such thing as passive or one size fits all. It's an old belief where it's somebody who just really wanted to just give you that edge of like, oh, look, but it doesn't work.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing it in story format. It's just such a nice way of sort of understanding these points a lot better. And I think that actually leads into the next point, which is let's call it the shortcut culture. You mentioned that shortcuts in accounting never lead to anything substantial. In an area where many are using AI to replace employees or certain software, whatever the case may be, to skip technical mastery. What are the long-term risks for a firm and its clients when they start relying on these outside parties or algorithms, or these software stacks, rather than their own internal self-belief and experience? What is your opinion on that?
Well, Unintentionally, it's also cutting jobs. So basically, people who are trained in those fields, let's say they could be their 30s, 40s, or 50s, now they're outdated, and the realisticness of them stepping into another field is very low to none. So then they end up getting stuck in like a low paid job that they can't afford their bills. And so we're just taking out things in different ways that really, really took into humanity of where we are. I think it could be used as a way to help, like to sort your ideas, but not necessarily to fully replace or like in a transition. But what it does do, I do see time and time again, is that eventually what happens is that it just becomes a bigger stumbling block in terms of not growing, not taking the step, not fixing the alignment and the liability. Like I was telling you legally, let's say back for me, what ended up happening is that I didn't think I had enough situations to do that. However, the cost outbeat me at the time, but far more greater, like till today, 5 years working off of that fee that I paid for that handbook. I don't need to touch it anymore. It's literally curated for the client, meaning like their name, number, what package they chose, year, and like very minimal things in order to get a client on board. So you have to think about what you really want in a business. If you want something more passive, then you're going to need to accept these types of things that it can happen, and chances are it will. And the only person they're going to look at is you as the business owner.
No, 100%. I agree with you. I think it's this is the scary but also the interesting part, where it is changing the landscape. So maybe getting into a little bit how you guys are very specifically sort of tailoring things. You spoke about earlier about being a mom and a founder, and it's all about designing your own life. And as for your clients, how would they distinguish between a firm that's truly architecting their financial freedom and one that is simply automating their reporting and using the latest tech fad? How would you say are you actually sort of really positioning and making them feel like, hey, we actually care about your financial future, and we are really thinking about it. It's not just plugging in automations or doing any fancy things?
So the person that default and that default, they're choosing that. They're choosing to disconnect. They're choosing that life of like what was given to them instead of the life of designing that can give more freedom. I recently did a bigger shift this year on the business in terms of like how we take tax clients, how we even take our monthly work. And clients that are just looking for like that pass through and not involvement, what ended up happening is that I really realized it's a place to shift the blame and not take the responsibility. And it's fairly common in the accounting and tax field where it's accepted that the accountant and tax advisor is the person who has to take the blame. And I'm going to give you a story. We have a different client now going through a huge, massive compliance issue. And it's actually fraud. And it took them probably 2.5 months to really start to digest the depth of it. And it's a company who, what ended up happening was she took on, because it's tax deductible, I have things taken care of. It removed her from what it really needed to involve her. And what ended up happening was when we came on, even something like signing on for the bank and looking at her the bank was like an alarming thing, that it was like, how do you do it? What's the login? On my accounts? What's happening? This and that. It was like a real awareness of all of the things. So it took her out of like builder and into like reality of what was passing. So the uninvolvement, what ended up happening was decisions were made from that because the founder wasn't involved. And there's really this strong old belief that, you can just take it on in other ways. It could be that that's the best that the person was at the time, meaning my client or anyone else, but it's a decision to be conscious or unconscious in your business. And I say this from, over 20 years doing this and really helping multiples of thousands of clients doing this, the passive way of business is going to keep you in the spot of where you are. And chances are you're not happy. And until you take that spot, no matter where it is, and I tell clients, it's like at the end of the cliff, right? You're at the end of that cliff, you're at that edge. And we're kind of like, are we taking the step or not? Because when you look at what's under the hood, it's the same thing when you go and you clean the dishes, take out the dishwasher in any area of your life. And money, business, and tax is no different. The difference is that there was these, again, beliefs of like a million years ago to disconnect from it and not really be involved. But what I see happening is that then how this is passed down to generation, meaning like to the kids now have it. And I know for me growing up, there was a huge disconnect, and it creates a lot of like low level feelings and a lot of emotions between everybody. And when I really made this my life purpose and my life passion of the deeper work, at a minimal level, you can still live a quality life. You just have to master your section of where you are, and then growth is infinite. But until you have that belief inside and that connection, that default is always going to be there. So that minimalist part, it's a decision that you're making. I'm only half in. It's like when you go to the beach, right? You're standing at the water. Oh gosh, it's cold. Oh, do. Like you step in, you take yourself out, and it's all okay. However, with business, it's not all okay because the bills are accruing, your life is accruing at the same time. So like when bills come in, the electric, if your car needs repairs, things that are part of life that they start to trigger you, if we don't connect them and really make an intentional purpose, all this, it's just another form of the same thing. It's just going to be more and more and more. And the only person to look at is ourselves in the mirror. And if we can't, that's the place to start.
Oh, that's very inspirational. Thank you, Margo. So the last question really comes down to, what does the future look like? And many in the industry are split between being afraid of AI or being overexcited by it. Given your 20 years of experience, why do you believe that the true leadership in accounting can never be replicated by a system? And what should the next generation of practitioners focus on to remain indispensable?
Always put yourself at some level to oversee each structure. And don't accept that passive way if you're really unhappy. And that middle ground is really the area to really at least begin. There's always going to people that are going to run for it, but those are the people that always look for the shortcuts. Those are the people that are always looking for quicker. Like their nervous system isn't regulated, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's a matter of how you want to operate and choose. The ones who are kind of old school, I'll call them, a lot of my legacy clients and the ones who come on are the ones who, and I do feel this in general, is that there will be people who like the human component, because there is something to say around discussing your business and your taxes and how your family actually lives, because how else are you going to adapt and how else are you going to evolve when really that's your basis of paying for retirement, medical bills and all of these things. And until you really step into that. Now, again, I'm not saying don't take them on, but take them on with caution, of an awareness of where you are, that when things evolve, okay, I did that. Maybe I need to realign on that part of what I'm doing. And I'll tell you, for myself, internally, we do use some, but not as many as people think. And we've actually had a big client come in. I mean, everyone's big in different ways, honestly, but we had one fairly large client in, I think it was like December time, hovering over January, November, like that time. And his first question to me was, what AI tools do you use to make CFO dashboards every month? And I said, my CFO dashboard, these fingers. And he was just totally not impressed. Chances are I didn't get the job because of that. However, we weren't of value. because he's a more passive person, and it's okay, but it's not going to get the results that he's looking for. So it's misaligned in that way of where if we don't get that involvement. So choose what works for you, what feels good. And if it doesn't, just wait until it does, because you're going to be the only person who really bears that news and that burden. Just like I had that court case when this ex-client, stole from my firm, and it made a living impact on me for 2 years. However, it shaped things that structure will always replace volume and noise of things, so that I can live a good quality life, serve my clients well, and what I want the same for all of you listening to this.
Well, that's incredible, Margo. Yeah, it's interesting how it's, there's never a one size fits all. You're going to have different people that come to you with different expectations and different needs. And, as this wave of new technology is introduced in all spheres of business, it's navigating it. But actually, what I really appreciate about your discussions were, the human part of it and humanizing, where our strengths and our value adds really are, and really what's important to the clients that we service every day. Margo, thank you so much.
Sorry, I actually have one other story that I want to share here.
Brilliant.
I have one cutest legacy client. He might be like 82 right now. And I think I met him high 60s. And he does all the work himself. And just for the sake of legacy to the kids, to the fam of keeping peace, he has me inside. And he says to me sometimes, you don't even have to do the work, Margo. He goes, it's just your presence. And he did that so that if there's a sort of tension with everyone, it just brings the calm to the noise that's for no reason. And I'm not saying this to say like, oh, feather, everyone needs to do this, but it's just something to think about, that connection being lost with AI, communication. Don't let that be you. Do it in a controlled way that you still have the relationships so that it goes far beyond what your wildest dreams could ever think of.
I 100% agree with you. I think the relationship aspect is still, the most powerful part. And I think that's really where you and your company shine. Margo, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss these incredible topics with us and giving your insights and your years of experience. We really do appreciate it. Any last parting words from you?
I'm always here to help. Send a question. I'm sure with the show notes that my contact information is going to be here. There's a ton of education that I have out there. And I really thank you all for listening, and thank you for having me today.
Brilliant, Margo. The pleasure is all ours. Thank you.
You're so welcome.